Hola a todos. Hoy Arquitectura realizó una entrevista al arquitecto McVoy, Senior Partner en la oficina de Steven Holl Architects, en donde nos habló un poco sobre el proceso que manejan en la oficina, qué es la arquitectura para él, cuál debe ser el rol del arquitecto en un futuro, qué es lo más valioso que ha aprendido en la práctica y uno que otro consejo para los estudiantes de arquitectura. Muchas gracias por escuchar este audio. A continuación, la entrevista a McVoy.
Thank you for the interest, and I'm happy to be here. And this project is a special project because it's not just about making a building; it's also about architectural education, both for students and as an example, making the building an example on this campus. You know?
Sure.
So a day in the office. These are, pretty important, broad philosophical questions, but the first one isn't. So I'll start with the first one. Our office is a studio, and it's not a corporate office. It's the opposite. It's more like an artist studio, more like Corbusier's studio. So we limit the amount of work we do so that we can stay small and work intensely as a collaborative studio. So we have 33 people in New York, in our New York office, and 10 in our Beijing office. So this way, and we work in one big open space, like a studio. This way, Steven Holl can be involved in every project. I'm involved in the majority of the projects. We have two partners. I'm the senior partner. And everyone can see each other and collaborate, and there are models everywhere.
Sure.
We work both, Steven Holl works in watercolors, and we work in physical models.
Sure.
And we also work digitally with the most advanced computer modeling techniques. So for us, the digital did not replace the analog, but became a complementary tool. We use both. Because a physical model, you immediately see the light moving around. You immediately see what happens if you break something off or add something to it in a way that you can't in the computer. But we also have a 3D printer that allows us very quickly to go from the computer models into a physical model and then back into the computer. So it's an iterative process. We have pin-ups for all the projects, just like you do in school. So we pin up the project,
Okay.
and then the project team critiques it, sometimes the whole office.
Discusses.
And we have, about every other Saturday, we have something called Theory Hour in the morning, where the office gathers around the table and looks at a project through a much larger theoretical lens. Yes. And we invite visiting people to come for that. So it's really a atelier that's dedicated to the art of architecture and not just our practice. Our design process, at first we don't have a style that we bring to each project. Each project is unique, and we develop an architectural concept and an architectural language specific for that project. So so when we start a project, we, as I say, we don't have a style. So every project is like a new beginning, and we aim to come up with a concept or series of concepts that capture the full potential of the project, both in its site and in the trajectory of history and the aspirations of the particular program that will be happening there, studying art, or in this case, economics and law faculty. So we go through a period we call breathing in, a kind of absorbing everything about the site. So when I came here in 2010, when we started this project, I was immediately struck by the quality of the landscape, by the presence of the mountains changing all the time, by the climate, allowing an indoor-outdoor campus. People study and socialize outside as much as inside. So this led to a particular concept for this project, which we call space turned inside out. So the idea that the interior space flows to the outside and vice versa. And that becomes a question. Concepts become questions. An idea, so space turning inside out, it's just an idea, right? How do you do that? But it's a question. How do you make space turn inside out? So that begins research into form and space within the office. And then that gets applied to the specific project. And so Steven Holl works we absorb the project, we think about the essences of the project, its place, its site, its climate, but also its aspirations. What is a university building in the 21st century? How do you bring two different departments together? How do you fuse architecture and landscape? These are all, how do you look at the campus here? This campus is like a history of architecture in Colombia, right? Starting with Rotor, who's international, and then, but doing the plan, but then you have Spanish colonial, then you have international modernism from Rotor, then you have a kind of philosophical, kind of psychological modernism of Alvar Aalto and Rotor's later work, and then you have Salmona, and then how can we project that into the future with our building? You see, so though we look at all that, that's the potential, right? And then we start working. Steven Holl is working in watercolor, but we're simultaneously working in model research, turning space inside out, and we have these pinups, and the idea starts to come together. Steven Holl is leading the design, but the whole team is working on it. And then it begins to condense into a new, we hope, a new architecture specific to this place that has inspiring spaces. And then, then it goes through, my lecture today is from concept to tectonic to experience, right? How does the concept become matter and material under gravity, in light, and then once you build the building, it becomes an experience. It becomes abstract again through the experiential. So from idea to concrete to the abstract again. So that's the process. What is architecture? Architecture is an art of ideas in space and form and material. And architecture is an art of time. Different than painting, which is there, static, you experience it and you can project into it, but it's a moment, right? Even if the more abstract space, but architecture is like music, you experience it through time, and it's constantly changing in perception as you move through a building. It's not static and it's immersive. And your impression of a building is made of many moments, a continuous time, from when you open the door handle to when you've left the building. So it's like music in that way. So it's an art of time. And we try to incorporate that in our design process, because we don't look at a static plan. We design in perspective, overlapping space, what the experience, how will the architecture be experienced through time. Architecture is also, because it's an art of time, it's really fundamentally two types of time. The time of the individual moving through the space, and then the universal time of the heavens and the sun moving across and through space. And those two come together. The atmosphere, the light, all the things that happen on the earth in time with your own personal internal time together, right? What should the role of the architect be in the future? We need to reinvigorate the role of the architect as a kind of philosophical projector of new ways of organizing cities and space. If you look at, say, the 60s and the 70s, architects were proposing very radical visions, not just for a building, but for a whole city or for a landscape. Or look at Buckminster Fuller. He was thinking about the use of energy across the globe in the universe in 1933, right?
Yeah.
But you look at the whole generation of architects that came out of Europe in the 60s, Rem Koolhaas, Steven Holl, Zaha Hadid, Bernard Schumi. They were thinking about, or Super Studio, or these kinds, they were thinking very broadly about how architecture could contribute to big questions of the time about urbanism, how we live on the planet, how we relate to the environment. These are the urgent issues that architects have a unique capacity to address because of their training in the social use of space and how we inhabit our planet through material and building. Most valuable thing I learned in the practice, to be always open and receptive to potential ideas. You never know where ideas will come from, and you need to be open and listen to things, could be chance things that happen that influence how you think about a project. And then you have to work tirelessly to figure out how to embody those ideas in their most potential in a building, which is very hard work. You know, pushing technology, you know, dealing with budgets, dealing with clients, all this stuff. But you always have to think of the high aspiration through this. So if you have a good ideal at the beginning of a project that you believe in, that what you're doing can contribute to this situation through architecture, that ideal it sustains you through the process. What's some advice to give to students of architecture? To work at two levels simultaneously. The most visionary level, think very broadly about your art and how you can apply it to urgent situations today. But also the art of architecture, just the fundamental experience of material and light that's timeless, that's been in architecture from day one. Those are your tools, those are your materials. Matter, structure, light, space, that's your instrument. So you have to learn it very well. You have to make models, you have to think about movement, you have to think about light, you have to think about structure and how to bring these things together. And that's your art, that's your material, and then you apply it, okay, in many different ways with a broad thinking. But it's just like a great musician or composer. If you don't know your tools, you can't apply them in a kind of broad, intelligent, transformative way. So you have to work at both internally your art and externally what's important globally right now that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, because in one of the discussions we had in the group was like, how is the role of an architect made like an architect that creates movements on an action, takes action in the society and doesn't wait that something is going to happen. What do you think about that? Maybe there's like a possibility in the future that the architect is the one that proposes, the one that changes.
That goes to what I was saying earlier, that we have to regain the role of architecture to project future ideals.
That's
right?
True.
Possible ideals. So what you're saying is doing that. You make on your own with your friends a proposal for a part of the city that's just visionary, and you try to get it out there, you know, and you publish it, and projecting possible future ideals. Right?
Yeah, because we have like this power now to propose, to project, but the students doesn't believe that because they think that you have like a client that is the professor and comes here.
No.
It is funny because
you don't need a client to make architecture.
That's true.
I mean, you need a client to make a building.
Yeah.
But you don't need a client to make architecture or visionary projections. Look at the work I was saying earlier, like Super Studio and Bernard Tschumi and Steven Holl and Koolhaus and Buckminster Fuller and Corbusier. I mean, Corbusier was doing master plans for Latin America. He didn't have a client. He was just thinking. A lot of them weren't that good. I'm not saying they were all good. Some of them were amazing. But that's how we have to work. You know, our responsibility is to the society. Okay, then we get a client and we make a building and we're responsible to that client. But even when we're responsible to that client, we're responsible to the society. Like when we do our museum, our client isn't the museum, our client is the public that will use the museum for the next 100 years.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and our role, most of all, here in Latin America countries is really important because of the population that is growing and growing and growing.
Yeah.
And we have to address that. But the importance of this interview is more for the students to know that they have like the power to change that.
Yes.
So being optimist.
That's the advice I would give to students.
Well, thank you very much. Good luck with your lecture.